On the heels of a chilling audio message from its leader, ISIS launching a surprise offensive against the key Iraqi city only about 70 miles from Baghdad. The terror group may be on the verge of recapturing Ramadi. It seized the police headquarters there, has raised its black flag over the provincial government building. Iraqi forces are fighting back with support from coalition airstrikes. Let's go live to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Very disturbing information. Barbara, what are you learning?
Well, Ramadi is the second largest city in western Iraq. It is critical for the Iraqis to hold on to it. Right now, a U.S. official tells me it may be down to 50-50 between ISIS and the Iraqi forces as to who controls the city. They launched this offensive today from ISIS fighters, sending car bombs through the city breaches, trying to take back a building, raising their flag. Officially, the Pentagon says it's an ebb and flow of the fight. Ramadi has been contested for months between the two sides, and the fighting goes back and forth. But the reality is the U.S. conducting some 12 airstrikes in the last 72 hours there, trying to do everything it can to ensure the Iraqis are able to hold on to this city.
And the new audio from the ISIS leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, does that concern the Pentagon? What's the reaction over there?
You know, it's the same thread that we're hearing continuously. The Pentagon saying that audio proves that they're desperate because he's asking for more recruits and more fighters. The Pentagon very much insisting ISIS is on the defensive. They're no longer acting as an offensive military force, and all of these events reflect their attempt to hold on to territory. Fair to say there's a lot of people that may disagree with the Pentagon assessment, still see ISIS as a very potent force, and the Iraqi forces struggling to hold on to what they have. Wolf?
All right, Barbara, stand by. I want to get some more on what's going on. Joining us, Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. She's a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee, also a veteran of service, military service in Iraq. What's going on? ISIS was supposed to be kicked out of Ramadi, but now they're on the verge, it looks like, of taking over this key city in the Anbar province. What's going on?
Well, I think, Wolf, what we're seeing here, again, is the issue that I've brought up many times before, and that is that right now the United States policy and what's happening in Iraq is not addressing the core of the problem that's allowing ISIS to be able to continue to come back, in particular, into these Sunni stronghold areas. The fact that the central government in Baghdad is still not arming and equipping the Kurds and the Sunnis who are trying to fight for their homeland, fight for their territories and their people. We saw in Tikrit, for example, ISIS was pushed out, but because there was no plan in place for the Sunni people to secure themselves, to provide this governance for their own area, we saw the Shia militia, the guys who were fighting against ISIS, going in and razing homes and burglarizing and stealing and looting and really terrorizing the people there. So this is, again, another symptom of the problem that we're seeing, where the United States is still not providing arms and weapons directly to these Sunni fighters and Kurdish fighters on the ground who are fighting against ISIS.
I want you to stand by, Congressman. We have a lot more to discuss. It looks like the Iraqi military also right now, it's pretty depressing, missing in action once again. Much more coming up. We'll take a quick break. We have more breaking news. A senior administration official now telling CNN, confirming that 8 new coalition airstrikes against ISIS targets in Ramadi have taken place in the last 5 hours or so. We're back with Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, an Iraq War veteran, a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Obviously, it looks like they're desperate right now to prevent ISIS from taking over Ramadi. It was only a few weeks ago, General Martin Dempsey, the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he said Ramadi was not symbolic in any way, not central to the future of Iraq. He made a much bigger deal about the Baiji oil refinery, which also seems to be in control of ISIS, at least 80% of it right now. I don't get it.
Yeah, again, I think we're seeing a continued effect or continued symptoms of some of the core problems that we've seen that have allowed this problem to occur in Iraq in the first place, that has allowed ISIS to continue to maintain a stronghold, to be able to come back to these strong Sunni, particularly the Sunni-held areas. We just passed the defense bill today from the House, and we were able to include in there a provision that dealt directly with authorizing funding to the Sunni fighters and the Kurdish fighters, bypassing the central government in Baghdad, because we've seen their unwillingness to empower these fighters.
But they're not going to. The administration says they got to go through the central government. They say they have confidence in Haider al-Abadi, the new prime minister. They say he's better than Nouri al-Maliki, the old prime minister. And if you were to arm the Kurds directly or the moderate Sunni forces in the Anbar province directly, that would undermine the strength, the sovereignty of that central Baghdad government.
Which, again, this is an area where I disagree with the administration. We see a growing number of members of Congress who disagree with the administration on this point and will continue to push to get this funding and these weapons that these fighters who are really bravely fighting on the ground that they really so desperately need to be effective. One of the leaders, the major leader of the Sunni tribe fighters, a sheikh who's coming here to Washington next week to plead their case. I'll be meeting with him one-on-one as he really paints a realistic picture of what they're facing on the ground and what they need and how desperately they need it.
I know you've been critical of the Obama administration, and you're a Democrat, because they refuse to use the phrase radical Islam, and you've been very critical. Have they been in touch with you? Do they talk to you about that? I know you're critical of them for refusing to arm the Kurds, America's friends, directly. What do they say to you?
Well, this is an area, unfortunately, where there's an agreement to disagree. We've heard arguments. They've heard my arguments. I've heard their arguments. And I think the issue here is that we have to stay focused on what our mission is. Our mission is to defeat ISIS and these Islamic extremists who threaten not only people in the Middle East, but we're seeing increasingly people around the world. So this continued failed policy of supporting one central government in Baghdad that is led by the Shia leadership that's heavily influenced by Iran, this does not best serve our core focus and mission, which is and should be to defeat ISIS.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Wolf. Aloha.
Coming up, other news we're following. The engineer whose train was going 106 miles an hour before it derailed finally talks to federal investigators. We're getting new information. Stand by.